Welcome. I'm Lee Cowan, and this is Here Comes the Sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. It's not often you see Sarah Jessica Parker and her husband, Matthew Broderick, performing side by side. But for the last 2 years, they've been working on a play together. And Jane Pauley was lucky enough to witness the entire journey firsthand.
And just as they were about to begin the first performance in the Hudson Theater, Broadway went dark.
We were on this side when they told us the governor said we had 20 minutes to clear out.
I remember
we were
that.
in this area somewhere.
Thinking they'd be back in a couple of weeks, not 2 years. But in that time-honored tradition, the show must go on.
Why is that so
It was a priority for both of us. I mean, sincerely. And as dates were shifting, this play stood kind of in the center of everything.
And trying to guess patterns of a pandemic are impossible.
More excerpts from their conversation coming up a little later in the show.
And Matthew, I do love the socks.
Do you think this was an error?
Not at all. They're whimsical.
I didn't realize they would show. But oh, look at that. Yeah.
Does your wife ever look at your wardrobe?
Yes.
He was very concerned about what he was wearing today.
I
We
didn't
did
know
it
what
last
to-
night around 10:40.
Yeah.
Okay, so
But not
But
the
not
socks.
the socks.
Not
That
the
was
socks.
me this
you did
morning.
it last night. You put your clothes out last night.
We did. We put
Yeah.
our clothes out last night.
Then Rita Braver shows us the works of an untrained and often unheralded artist whose backstory is just as colorful as his art.
The drawings in ballpoint pen and colored pencil or pastels are intricate and imaginative. And though they bear handwritten titles of places, from the Baltic Sea near Stockholm to Leverest, thought to mean Mount Everest in the Himalayas, there is little resemblance to those locations.
Some of these works don't even look like Earth as we know it. It's almost like a fantasy landscape that's occurring in his mind.
The mind of the late artist Joseph Yoakum.
It's all ahead right here on Here Comes the Sun. Sarah Jessica Parker and husband Matthew Broderick are nothing if not patient. When Jane Pauley met up with them in 2020, they were excited to be performing on a Broadway stage together. But then came COVID, and Broadway went dark. But the lights are back on. They went back, so did Jane, and we'll pick up where they all left off.
Hi.
Hi.
Isn't it strange? It's Groundhog's Day.
Much of the pandemic has felt that way, like our visit with actors Sarah Jessica Parker and Matthew Broderick. 2 years ago, we met at this very spot.
The two of you have worked together before, but never as husband and wife.
And never worked like this.
Certainly not like this.
When did a troupe of actors on Broadway ever experience having a show, closing down the theater, and 2 years later coming back?
Yeah.
That's never happened.
No, not even close, I don't think.
Back in March of 2020,
This is room 719.
Sweet 719.
Plaza Suite had just arrived on Broadway
I couldn't impose like that.
after a sold-out run in Boston.
I'm one of the people that saw Plaza Suite in Boston. I was there.
We had the flu.
We had a very bad flu, which I'm still questioning. I enjoy the mystery of, was that the flu or was that COVID?
And just as they were about to begin the first performance in the Hudson Theater, Broadway went dark.
We were on this side when they told us the governor said we had 20 minutes to
Yes,
clear out.
I
We
remember
were
that.
in this area somewhere.
Thinking they'd be back in a couple of weeks, not 2 years. But in that time-honored tradition, the show must go on.
Why is that
It was a priority for both of us. I mean, sincerely. And as dates were shifting, this play stood kind of in the center of everything.
And trying to guess patterns of a pandemic are impossible.
In the early days of the pandemic, the couple did what many people at home were doing.
Well, at first I was very like, well, I'll make the most of it and make some beans. And then somebody called me a bean dad or something, some incredibly derogatory word about people who were making beans.
Who soaked beans overnight.
No more beans.
And they've both been busy,
Oh my God, she just blocked me on Instagram.
reprising her role as the iconic Carrie Bradshaw. And he's starring in an upcoming series about the opioid crisis. But before, there was Broadway. Matthew Broderick has been a Broadway star since his first Tony at 21 as Neil Simon's alter ego in Brighton Beach Memoirs. And at 13, she was Broadway's beloved little optimist, Annie.
I'd like to be an optimist, but
They live longer.
Is that
I know
right?
because apparently I'm not one, and,
Your doctor
but
tell
I'm
you?
married to one. He's going to outlive me. They do live. They're wrong, but they live.
you should do a Neil Simon
That's the
play.
spirit.
Are you sure it's not the 14th?
I go through this with you every year. When it comes to money or dates or ages, you're absolutely unbelievable.
Neil Simon's Plaza Suite is a comedy about changing marital mores in the 60s.
It occurs to me, 1968 wasn't a great year, but doesn't it feel good to go back in time, to get out of this century and revisit 1968 in a way that feels different than it would have been 2 years ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
For better or worse, women's roles and men's roles, sexual politics, economy, class, culture. It really is of its time.
What's going on here? What's going on? Are you going to tell me where Mimsy is?
Are you gonna take an oath you're not gonna blame me?
I take it.
Parker and Broderick playing 3 couples in 3 acts.
It looks spectacular.
This was her first visit to the theater in 2 years.
This is what Karen wears under her. We shouldn't show this, but yeah,
Oh,
to
let's
give her
show
some
it.
extra weight.
Let's just show it.
They found dressing rooms, her makeup, candy, costumes, eerily, just as they were.
This is what happened during the pandemic to many of us.
Not very soft.
The set ready to go,
Gosh, it sure is beautiful.
and the stars getting there.
Roy goes out on the ledge to try to sneak into Mimsy's room. That's that ledge.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
Oh,
And
sorry,
then-
spoiler
And then
alert.
things happen.
Do you still think you're going to be able to get out there? Well, don't do
I
it right
don't
now
know.
because you
I
don't have the right
I
shoes
might
on.
need some sort of rigging.
Funny to find everything stayed the same when everything is so different.
You were supposed to be way, way moved on past Plaza Suite,
Yeah.
and the prospect of learning lines.
I thought they would come right back. They did not.
Please
very
tell the
bad.
story without naming names of the person.
I just was on stage with a lot of people and an actor who had a lot of lines coming up. And he grabbed another actor. I was standing right near them and said, "What's the name of the woman I'm about to talk about? Her name, I can't remember her name."
I used to do that on live television at the end of an interview.
Yeah.
I would say, "Thank you for being here."
Yeah.
God.
Sure. I forget names in this play all the time. 'Cause sometimes I just say a name that pops into my head and nobody minds, but then I have to
Jesse has all
remember
these
what I change it
ex-wives
to.
and the names that he says rather than the names Neil wrote.
Yeah.
Pretty amusing. We
Yeah,
feel confident that this time round we'll at least get to
Yeah.
leave the gate.
And the show goes on.
For God's sake, Miriam, what are you so nervous about?
Matthew Broderick, you've got people who are going to come and see anything he's in, I'm in.
And that's 30, 40 people right
30
there.
or 40.
Yeah.
And then your devoted Sex and the City generation.
We'll see.
She'll come out, just talk nicely to her.
We already had nice talking. Now we're going to have door breaking.
It was such an amazing experience in Boston. I just hope we can somehow find our way back there because this is a very wonderful play.
No, Roy, don't!
More from that conversation is coming up in just a few minutes. But up next, the radiantly colored works of artist Joseph Yoakum.
Yoakum got his first show in a coffee house in a church basement after a passerby who happened to be an anthropology professor saw Yoakum's work hanging in the windows of his apartment.
Joseph Yoakum. He didn't start drawing until he was in his 70s. He died only a decade later. But in that short time, he was prolific, often turning out a drawing a day. And turns out the story of his life is just as rich and complex as his art, as Rita Braver now shows us.
The drawings in ballpoint pen and colored pencil or pastels are intricate and imaginative. And though they bear handwritten titles of places, from the Baltic Sea near Stockholm to Leverest, thought to mean Mount Everest in the Himalayas, there is little resemblance to those locations.
Some of these works don't even look like Earth as we know it. It's almost like a fantasy landscape that's occurring in his mind.
The mind of the late artist Joseph Yoakum. Esther Adler is a curator of an exhibit of Yoakum's work now on view at New York's Museum of Modern Art and set to travel to the Menil Collection in Houston. He certainly had an inventive imagination.
Absolutely.
Not just on the paper, right?
Very much a real storyteller in every regard.
For example, it is known that Yoakum was born in 1891 in Ash Grove, Missouri. His mother was African American, born into slavery. His father might have had some Cherokee ancestry, but Yoakum frequently maintained that he was an American Indian born on a reservation. Why do you think that he often claimed that he was Native American?
He was worried that if people thought of him as a black artist, it would negatively affect the way they saw the work. And so he would identify himself as a Navajo or a Navajo, a joke on his first name, as a way of distinguishing himself, I think, to what was mainly a white audience at the moment that he began to attract attention.
Yoakum professed to have visited most of the places he drew, saying he traveled with circuses after he ran away from home as a child. It has been documented that he served in Europe in World War I. Afterward, he worked odd jobs, bouncing around several states before settling in Chicago. But he never studied art and didn't start making it until he was in his 70s. After, he said, he had a dream in which God told him to draw. Here's how Yoakum saw the entry into Pearl Harbor in Hawaii.
To me, the most kind of fascinating thing about this work is what appears to be a giant head that's moving towards the shore. But it's, of course, a head made out of kind of these curving mountain forms.
Yoakum got his first show in a coffee house in a church basement after a passerby who happened to be an anthropology professor saw Yoakum's work hanging in the windows of his apartment. Other shows followed, and soon a group of young artists and their professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago started spreading the word about Yoakum's work.
There is a touch. I'll use the word magical. There is a touch to the way he touched the paper, which is quite moving, I think.
New York-based artist Cynthia Carlson was visiting Chicago in the late 60s when an Art World pal took her on her first of several visits to Yoakum's home studio. What do you remember about Yoakum?
You know, in one's lifetime, you probably have an experience of knowing several people, maybe more, and you feel enriched for having known them. He was one of those people to me.
And when a curator from this very museum was visiting Carlson's apartment to see her work, he spotted one of Yoakum's drawings on her wall.
Whose is that? What is that? So I told him about Yoakum, and he arranged a show.
That's right, Yoakum's work was featured in a group show here back in 1971. During his lifetime, he sold his drawings for just a few dollars. Today, they go for up to $20,000. Joseph Yoakum died of prostate cancer at age 81 in 1972, just a decade after beginning his career as an artist.
50 years later, he's a huge hero to many artists. I don't know anybody that hasn't been totally thrilled by the show. And some of them didn't know who he was, so this is a completely new revelation.
Here we go. This is literally the
Excuse
first
me?
time I'm stepping on the set in almost 2 years to the day.
Wow, yeah.
Almost to the day. It's absolutely amazing.
After the break, more from one of Hollywood's most affable power couples.
It looks bigger from the house.
Welcome back. Sarah Jessica Parker is known for her forward-thinking fashion sense and her love of shoes. So does she pick out her husband, Matthew Broderick's socks and ties, too? Jane Pauley found out, along with much more about the couple's love of theater and their family's future.
And Matthew, I do love the socks.
Do you think this was an error?
Not at all. They're whimsical.
I didn't realize they would show. But oh, look at that. Yeah.
Does your wife ever look at your wardrobe?
Yes.
He was very concerned about what he was wearing today.
I
We
didn't
did
know
it
what
last
to-
night around 10:40.
Yeah.
Okay, so
But not
But
the
not
socks.
the socks.
Not
That
the
was
socks.
me this
you did
morning.
it last night. You put your clothes out last night.
We did. We
Yeah.
put our clothes out last night.
To pick a tie and a shirt is
He's so
very,
good at it. He doesn't need
but
my
it's-
help
I
at
find
all.
it just horrible.
It's just when he cares. And
Nobody wears these anymore,
I
by the
love
way.
that tie.
Yeah.
He has all these ties of his father's that I always want him to wear, but
I wear them.
yes, he does wear them. But the one we picked for today had a
Imagine that. There's a scene in Sex and the City where a lot of it takes place in the closet. Does his closet look so much like Matthew's?
No, it's very different. Matthew's closet is more colorful. Matthew's closet is messier, like because he's a real living human person with, like out
I'm
a
not
set,
fictional. I'm
without
not a
a
fictional
set
character.
decorator,
Yeah.
cleaning it all up and tidying it
And I don't go to work in a suit.
no, so it has a completely different complexion. And there's like stuff all pinned up and a coffee cup that's been sitting there with old coffee in it for a number of days. And
Yeah. It's pretty well organized because we moved not that long ago. So it was put in very beautifully, and most of it has just never been touched. So it's there's one section with 5
It's
gray
almost like an
t-shirts
installation.
and sweatpants and 2 pants and a drawer of socks, and that's about all I touch in there, except when I'm meeting a dignitary such as yourself, and then I put on the tie.
So, you come from a theatrical family. You have opened countless, unless you can count. How many Broadway shows have you staged off Broadway anywhere?
Between 15 and 51.
Okay.
I don't know. I honestly don't know. It's scary when you start counting.
But what I'm getting at is, Matthew Broderick is one of those names that one simply associates with.
God, he's great. Something like that.
Phil, that's exactly where I was going.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, explain the tradition of the show must go on. Why?
Why is a good question. I think it's different for everybody, but for me, you have to, if you don't have this sort of make-believe feeling that it's vitally important that the show go on exactly on time and be perfect, you all live this fantasy that that's very important. I can take a step back and realize it's not that important, but everybody thinks it's absolutely life or death that I come in on this line in time. Otherwise, I won't be able to put my hat on the hook, and that becomes critically important. So if you let that illusion go away, the whole thing would fall apart in a way. It's built on a pretend importance.
Matthew really did miss going to the theater. You can say, it makes my life richer, fuller. I make a connection, I hear a story, but it's very hard to define why there is the relationship between the audience and the people on the stage and the community that creates it. What is the agreement? Why do they both feel that they are necessary for each other? it is a cultural necessity for a lot of people. Why? We don't understand. We don't understand, but we do, right? Like,
Yeah.
But to be an actor, to go on stage in a new play or on any given night, is to believe it's going to be fine.
Yeah. No matter how afraid I am, I hope I never say I'm not going to do it because I'm afraid. I do it. I want to make it. You know. I always, you know, feel bad about a bad review or whatever, but I'm not going to stop.
You read them?
No, but I kind of get the sense occasionally. But, you know, when the person at the desk won't make eye contact with you, you think, what's wrong? Why are you so quiet today? But I always want to try to make it better and keep going until I really can't. See, that's negative of me. But
well, till you can't. I thought you meant because you were no longer here.
that is what I meant.
But Matthew never ever talks about like retirement ever. He
And
never.
you do?
It's not that I talk about retirement, but I talk more so about time spent differently sometimes. You know, I'll think I just want to be with the kids. I just want to be available to them 24 hours a day. I just want to know that if somebody calls me or texts me now, that I'm at total liberty to just be indulgent, even if it's not necessary. And so that looks appealing sometimes, although I don't think I would be a good mother in whole if I wasn't a working mother, you know.
I'm Lee Cowan. We'll see you here next time on Here Comes the Sun.